What is up, guys? Today I've got another super spicy amp to show off. This is the Scalpel 50 by Mike at Lickliter Amplification. Now, Mike has been modding amps and building custom amps for a very long time now, and the Scalpel 50 is one of his original designs. It's a single channel, high gain amp, and is probably the most laser focused, singular purpose built high gain amps that I have ever plugged into. And as a result, I've not really having to worry about any extra features or channels. The result is easily one of the best high gain amps that I have ever plugged into. Yeah, I know it sounds like a little bit of hyperbole here, but I've never played a high gain amp that just delivers gain in such a clean and clear way that still cuts as potently as the top end of this amp does. Now, I know that there are lots of boutique amps out there that I have not gotten to try yet, but out of all the high gain amps that I have played, this amp, pardon the pun, is a cut above everything else. Okay, let's go through some of the features on the Scalpel. And as you can see, there really isn't a whole lot going on here, but I think it's everything that you need from a one-channel amp. You got your typical depth and presence control, you've got your tone stack, you got your typical controls there, but what Mike does give you is the ability to toggle a three-way bright selector, and you have an edge control over here next to the gain control. The master volume control on this amp is genuinely impressive, and Mike told me, he said he spent a lot of time getting this just right. Most typical tube amps, they will kind of tap out on their volume when the volume knob hits about 9 or 10 o'clock, but the Scalpel, on the other hand, it's a completely linear taper on that volume increase as you turn the volume knob up. So the result is a very usable low volume sound, and you can comfortably play this in the room with a 212 or even a 412 and really not bother your neighbors or anybody else in the house. The other useful feature is that bright switch. Now, this switch has two different bright cap values at the left and right settings, and in the center position, the switch is completely bypassed. With either bright cap position engaged, you also get additional gain, so if you want to have a more moderate crunch type sound, you can leave the switch in the middle position and then use something like an external boost to toggle more gain, which, to no one's surprise, is kind of how I enjoyed using this amp. In the position to the left, it's more of a bright and cutting sound, and it cuts some of the low end out. Now, this is really good if you have a very bass heavy cab or speaker setup, or if you have a darker guitar or darker pickups. On the other hand, on the right hand side of the switch, it's a little less bright than on the left side, but it has a little bit more of that low end, a little bit more lower mid range also. So it's kind of a good middle of the range sound if you want a little bit of extra gain, a little bit extra top end, not really needing to use a boost on the amp, but still having a kind of a balanced overall sound. Lastly, the edge control here, I believe it functions like a negative feedback control, where if you crank it up, it will sort of fatten up and darken the sound and smooth out the top end, or you can roll it back a little bit here and it will produce a more of a tighter feel and a little bit more potent of a top end. I feel like this control is really important to balancing the sound just the way that you want it, depending on which of the bright switch selections you've got. Now, on the back of the amp is very simple. You've got your speaker connections, you've got an effects loop, and you've got bias testing and adjustment points, and that's pretty much it. Again, this is a purpose-built single channel, no frills, face melting weapon, and if you need extra channels, he does have a 2-channel version with the clean channel, but if you're the type of player who's after a single channel, high quality, hand wired for high gain rock and metal, this amp is extremely impressive. Okay, let's hear some more sounds from the amp, and I'm back on the Lizzy Hale Explorer here with the amp going straight into the Splawn 412 with Scumback H75 speakers, and we're going to chill out a little here, kind of hear the full range of sounds that you can get from the amp, and I've got it here, as you can see. It's in the middle toggle position on the bright switch, and as usual, the JHS Klon in front of the amp. I mean, all of my drive pedals sound absolutely incredible through this amp, but the Klon kind of produces the sound that I favor the most. Time for the boost. So as you can hear, all of your flexibility is in that bright switch right there. And I think depending on what style of music you want to play, I think setting the switch to establish your gain and voice and then adjusting the edge control, the depth, and the presence is sort of really all there is to dialing this thing in. Now, like other single channel amps, you sort of either like the sound it produces or you go find a different amp. Speaking of the sound, I asked Mike if this amp was voiced based on anything in particular, and he said that really it's just sort of kind of an amalgamation of all the various circuits that he's kind of studied and worked on over the years, and it doesn't really heavily favor any one specific brand or type of sound. Now, while this could be considered a drawback, I feel like it gives the amp sort of an advantage in that it's not going to be kind of shoehorned into a specific genre or style because of its sound. Now, there are some hints of familiarity here and there with the sound, so at least to me, my brain has a reference point to latch onto. And here in the room, I can definitely hear and feel a little bit of modded Marshall as well as some, maybe a little 5150 mixed in there as well. It's kind of like Mike took what was, what made certain amps feel great and sort of distilled those down into one sound and just kind of gave the amp just enough control over the sound to massage it a tad. The result, I think, is a truly exceptional single channel high gain experience. Now, at this point, I would usually be talking about how this thing did on stage, but this amp, it already belongs to someone else, and the new owner was gracious enough to let me try it out first and then bring some content to you guys before it gets sent on the way to the new owner. So out of respect for the new owner, I am not taking any chances here, so no post-gig report this time for this video, but you think that's going to stop me from setting up my stage setup, the wet dry setup that I usually gig with? No. When I hooked this thing up, I ran the speaker out into the THT hot plate and then out of that into this Port City 212. Then I ran the line out from the hot plate into the Quad Cortex for the wet effects and a blend of a couple of IRs. And then one output goes to the interface on my desk, kind of representing our PA, and then the other output from the QC goes into the ZLX FRFR. This is where the master volume on this amp truly shined. Now, unlike a lot of other amps that I've used on stage, it can be a challenge to get the amp set with the volume control set just right to kind of be in that just right decibel level, especially when you're trying to balance it using the decibel control on the hot plate as well. The hot plate decibel control for the cabinet volume jumps in increments, and the aux box, it has a smooth 0 to almost full volume control, but it's a lot more bulky to carry on stage. It also requires power, so it usually stays here and the hot plate comes with me to the shows. Anyways, the ability to run this amp at lower volumes and have a wide range of control over the volume at low power levels, or low volume levels, I should say, it really let me kind of ignore the hot plate's volume reduction feature and just use the line out volume going DI into the Quad Cortex, and that really was all there was to it. And because this amp sounds so good at very low volumes, I was able to bring the volume up out of the cabinet to kind of like that just right volume sound that I usually run on stage. Like, I don't run it very quiet, but I also don't run it really, really loud either. I mean, my bandmates may beg to differ, but I try to be civilized on stage and kind of let the PA and the FRFR do all of the heavy lifting. So all of that is to say that if I had taken the Scalpel on stage, the huge range of control this master volume gives you, it would have made it very easy to get a well-balanced stage sound and really not have to deal with the picky volume jumps when trying to use the hot plate to sort of wrangle in a really loud amplifier. Okay, so it's time for a conclusion, and who do I think this amp is for? At $3,400, you are in an exclusive club of boutique amp pricing, and this amp, its price is kind of right there with amps like the Bogner Helios, the hand-wired and factory-modified Marshalls, the Soldanos, the new Magnetones. So while there are plenty of hand-built high-quality amps out there, the Scalpel kind of falls right in line with some of the best names of the industry. And after playing a lot of those amps, this thing easily stands toe-to-toe with some of the best amps out there. If you want a second channel, like I said, Mike does make a 2-channel version, but if you are the kind of player who wants features like MIDI control, different voicing switches, or simply a different type of sound, this really isn't the amp for you. I feel like most of you who might be interested in this amp or an amp like this, you kind of know whether or not the voice and the features are what you're after. Amps like this, they really don't give much gray area for decision making. If you are interested though, I will put a link down to Mike's website in the video description, and if you are a owner of a Tonex device or a neural DSP unit like the Quad Cortex or the Nano Cortex, and you don't have $3,400 to swing at this amp, you're in luck, because I have got some awesome sounding captures, some capture packs that I've created of this amp. So if you're interested, my email address will be down there in the video description. Hit me up and I will hook you up. All right, another huge thanks to Mike and the new owner of this amp for giving me the opportunity to try this thing out. It has been a great time with this amp, and if you didn't catch my Jubilee farewell video, Mike and I have been cooking up a couple of ideas to sort of spice up the Jubilee and give it a bit of a sonic makeover, and I'm really excited to see what kind of awesome new sounds that we can come up with that amp and how it's gonna sound on stage. So if you're not subscribed, make sure you hit that button to join the crew and get these new video notifications. And if you want sneak peeks of the stuff that's going on before the cameras are rolling here, I will post, I post usually kind of behind the scenes stuff on my Instagram channel, so the link for that is also down there. Anyways, thanks for hanging out with me, and I will catch you guys in the next video. Take care.